Hey you guys, LootWizard here with another video on Gems of War, and we're going to be going over some raid boss weapons and tactics. So this is going to be another one of those educational slideshow videos, so it won't be that long. I'm just going to go over some of the basics and tactics and weapons, so let's get right into it. First of all, let's talk about the raid boss. The raid boss is the same no matter what month it is. The kingdom changes for which troops that you can use to fight against the raid boss. Now, of course, you can use any weapon that you have available that's unlocked in any of those events. So that really does help. But then you do have to choose some troops from whatever kingdom is available during that event. But the raid boss itself does not change. It's the same every single raid boss event. So the raid boss is a very powerful enemy to fight. It halves the enemy gem masteries that your team has. It's invulnerable to a lot of different things. It's immune to all status effects, so you can't put Entangle on it. So we're going to get into a little bit of the weapons later, and there's a weapon called Rope Dart, which when it hits an enemy, it will also entangle it. Well, the raid boss will be immune to that entangle, so be aware of that. It's also immune to Devour, Mana Drain, Transform, and Lethal Damage, and it cannot be cursed. So that's very important because there are other enemies in the game where you can curse them and then you can apply negative status effects to them after they're cursed. This raid boss cannot be cursed. The other thing here too is Barrier will not block its attack. So if you're choosing a class just thinking that the matching brown gems is going to give you the barrier, right, for rock solid talent if you're using a Titan class or one like that. Well, that barrier will help you defend your team against normal troops, but not against the raid boss's attack. So you want to attack the raid boss and kill it as quickly as possible. And we're going to go over some weapons and teams to do that as quickly as possible. First of all, let's talk about the Godslayer. I already touched a little bit on the kingdom, but as you can see here, this month's raid boss event is the kingdom called the Sin of Maraj. So you will be restricted to troops from only that kingdom in order to fight the raid boss. Then there is a new troop. Every single raid boss event that comes around, there's a new troop that comes out that's called the Godslayer troop. And as you can see here on this graphic that I pulled from the game, this is from a shop, and I already purchased it. And you purchase this with the gems that you earn in-game. So you don't have to spend any real money to participate in these events. If you're getting enough gems in the game, then you can use those gems to purchase these troops and things during these events. So that's what I recommend to do it that way. The Godslayer is very important for the raid boss event because it has the potential to do a lot more damage to the raid boss than regular troops. So let's take a look at that really quick. The Godslayer this week looks like this for this event. And its ability says it does 32 damage to an enemy. If they are a boss, deal 3 to 5 times the amount of damage there. Now, 5 times the amount of damage will be when you ascend it to mythic status. Right now, I only have enough of them to ascend it to legendary, which means I'm probably going to be doing the 3 to 4 times the amount of spell damage. So this is the easiest damage that you can do to a raid boss as far as a troop is concerned, apart from your weapon. And because you don't need any arcane trait stones to unlock the spell damage that this troop has. Whereas, as you can see here on the other graphic that I have, where it says traits here. Now, the Godslayer trait down here at the bottom, you're going to need arcane trait stones specifically for this troop in order to unlock it. I don't remember the exact number, but it's somewhere, I think, around 12 or so arcane trait stones. So if you don't have those, then you're going to have to focus on its spell damage here. Because you don't need, to maximize this, you don't need any arcane trait stones. So the easier battle setup is to focus on that spell damage rather than the skull damage. But there are teams that you can use for that skull damage, and we'll get into a few of those in a few moments. Let's go over some of the best raid weapons. And as you can see right here, there's basically a theme that goes on with what weapons I consider to be the best raid boss weapons. And they all center around eliminating all armor from an enemy. And I don't have these weapons in order from best to worst, because I think depending upon the situation and what other troops you have in that kingdom for that month's event, a different weapon may be better than another one. But a lot of these will still work pretty good in most situations to help you eliminate that raid boss. One of the best ones is always Mang down here. Mang is great because not only does it eliminate all armor, but it will also gain attack equal to the armor eliminated, and that will definitely help you a lot. And Mang is a weapon that is accessible for all players, because it just, once you level up enough, I forget the exact mastery that you have to get to, but I think it's pretty early on in your levels. I think by like level 100 or so, you're probably going to have Mang already, if not by level 200. So that's pretty early on in the game that you'll be able to get Mang. A lot of these other weapons are event weapons that you will have to wait for, and you might have to wait for them to come around in the Soul Forge in order to craft them. And you can tell which kingdom they're going to be for, because right here you can see right on the card it says what weapon this kingdom is associated with. So whenever that kingdom comes around, then you will be able to craft that weapon in the Soul Forge with some diamonds. Now, I will say here that the best ones that I think, the top three, just in my opinion, the top three weapons are probably going to be Mang, Earth's Fury, and Trickster's Shot. Those are probably going to be your three main weapons for defeating the raid boss. Hope's Crescent also is interesting, because at some point the life of the raid boss will exceed your life, and it will do triple damage, so it will do something close to like 90 damage, as well as eliminating all armor. And then, yeah. But you do have other weapons here, like Yasmine's Pride, which will give life to all allies boosted by armor eliminated. So if you have a troop in your kingdom that will do extra damage based upon its life, something like Catcher's the Bull, perhaps, its damage will be boosted by the amount of life it has. And so if you have troops like that, then that might be a good weapon to use. And so those are most all of the weapons here. Because eliminating all armor, just really quick, eliminating all armor means that you're still doing that damage. Doesn't mean that that damage is subtracted from the total armor and life of the raid boss. So that still counts as damage towards the raid boss, is what I'm saying. Okay, the other two weapons here that I want to mention are right here in the corner, called Dust and Sand and Lion and Tiger. They're not the best weapons out of this bunch, but I think they are easier to get than some of these other ones besides Mang. And what they do is they pull an enemy to the first position. Now, the reason why that's a good thing for this raid boss is because, let's say you're using that Godslayer. If we go back and you look at the Godslayer here, he's going to do extra skull damage against bosses if you have the trait unlocked, but that only is going to be good if this Godslayer troop is at the top of your team, because that's where you do the skull damage. So, using Dust or Sand or Lion and Tiger, these types of weapons, you could pull the raid boss to the front of the team, enemy team, and then that would allow your Godslayer troop, if it's at the top, to do that extra skull damage to it. Now, of course, you need a way to create skulls because your Godslayer troop could be killed off pretty quickly if you're not careful. So those are some of the best weapons there. A rope dart is obviously a weapon that is better than dust and sand and lion and tiger, because not only will it pull it to the front, but it will eliminate all armor from that troop as well. So yeah, there's the weapons, and let's talk a little bit about the setup here, even though I mentioned a little bit about that already. But this here is a graphic showing you that this is kind of a team that's based on spell damage to kill the raid boss. Now, there is skull damage that's in here, but I'm not really intending with this team setup to do skull damage to the raid boss. So what I mean here by spell damage is that Mang, once you cast its spell on the raid boss, it's going to eliminate all that armor. It will convert it into attack damage, and then the Envoy of Pride, which is the Godslayer troop, will do, once you get that powered up, it will do its spell damage to the raid boss. And in most cases, if you have that Godslayer troop ascended high enough, then it will one-shot the raid boss. You might have to do it twice, but it does a lot of damage to it. So that's basically a more of a spell team setup. Now, you could use something like Trickster's Shot, which focuses on spell damage as well instead of Mang, and that would also be pretty effective in this case as well. Then more of a skull team setup would be something like this. So if I wanted to focus on killing the raid boss with skull damage, I would have to have the Godslayer in the top spot, and I would have to have it fully traded in order for it to do that 3 to 5 times extra skull damage. And of course, rope dart is in here as the weapon where I could eliminate the armor from the boss and pull it to the front spot. And then I would have wrath in here, because I'm using the kingdom troops for this month's event. But the troops will be different for every event, but this is the basic idea that I'm talking about here, is that you'd have this kind of setup where you can pull the boss to the front with your weapon, have the Godslayer in the front to do the skull damage, and then include some kind of troop that can create those skulls, and then bam, you could kill the raid boss. Now, what I've kind of experienced in fighting a lot of these different raid boss events is that the easier way to do it is more of a spell damage team. Because when you're trying to use skulls to defeat the raid boss, it's unless you're using something like Mang, it still seems to me to be a slower way to kill the raid boss and the whole entire team. So you might, what I mean by that is that you might be able to kill the raid boss pretty quickly with this kind of setup, pulling it to the front, doing the skull damage to it. But then, do you have enough skull damage to kill off the rest of the troops? Because you still have 3 troops that you gotta finish off in order to win the battle. So that is where some of the difficulty comes in when you're focused on skulls and you don't have a weapon like Mang in order to increase your attack damage by a lot. Whether you win or lose, the amount of damage you do to the raid boss it still counts. And one thing to consider, though, is that when you defeat those ravens that show up in the events, they give you extra sigils. It's usually like 2 extra sigils for the event, which means you're going to have 2 extra turns to do 2 extra battles, I should say, for the event. But when you defeat those ravens, the extra sigils that you get from that only counts if you win the battle. So it is probably the best thing to build a team around defeating the entire raid boss team instead of just the raid boss. Now, you still want to make sure that you're going to be able to finish off and defeat that raid boss as quickly as possible, because once that's powered up, it's going to do lethal damage to one of your troops, and that could be devastating to your team setup, and you could end up having a loss without doing much damage to the raid boss. And in this event, doing damage to that raid boss really is like everything. One final last resort that you can do in this raid event is that you could actually spend sigils to increase the amount of skills on all of your allies. And you have this option here where you can go up to a mythical battle. You can spend 4 event sigils to increase all of your ally stats by 200%, which would be pretty easy battle. But I don't recommend doing this. If you can build a team where you can take care of that raid boss without spending all these extra sigils, that's the way to do it. But if you do really get frustrated and you can't seem to get, ahead in the event, you might want to consider maybe starting out with an epic battle or a legendary battle. Spend a few extra little sigils and see how that goes for you. So there you go, guys. That's my quick, short little raid boss tactics and weapons and how I go about making teams for these raid boss events. So yeah, I hope that helps you guys out. If this video helped you, then please leave a like on the video, or leave a comment if you think that maybe you have a better idea how to come up with teams. Leave a comment. We'll have a discussion about it. Always willing to do that. And yeah, consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.